We are now broadcasting to the informational superhighway. Like last time, we kind of talked about like the adolescent education rather than just all of education, right?
Yeah.
And I think maybe the easiest jumping off point, not that we need to not talk about it, but just so that I'm not needlessly retreading something. I think it's interesting to think about even just the concept of like going to college, right? Because
Yeah.
there's still, I think, very much the belief that if you want a decent job, you have to go to college, right? And maybe you can get a another. I think there's a little bit more awareness developing of like of trades and things like that, like becoming an electrician or whatever. But of course, many of those are, a very particular kind of job as well. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't go so far as to say that like they're predominantly like guy focused, but there are definitely I feel like a lot of women who don't want to become an electrician, and
Yeah.
probably a lot more women who wouldn't want to be an electrician than a lot of than men. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't have wanted to be one, but I am far from normal. So
I also think there's not a lot of exposure for women to see what that career is actually like, if that
hmm,
makes sense. Like, it's historically male dominated and not in a way that it's like women can't be electricians. It's like, it just has been. I never was exposed to any. This is how, I mean, you learn how electricity works, right? But like, welding, plumbing, electrician, the trades aren't ever really touched on in regulatory school. So to like have an interest in them, you either need to know someone in the trades or have a really good guidance counselor who's like telling you that this is the thing. Um, but I love that this is where you've brought the topic today, Isaac, because I have a lot of feelings on this. And I think you're absolutely right. There's this, like the last like 40 years, maybe more, there's been this weird thing where people think you have to go to college, or it's like that's how you will be a functional member of society is to go to college and get this magic piece of paper that you're going to pay an assload of money for that might get you a job. But the trades are often overlooked, even though they pay most of the time much better than the job you're going to get getting a college degree and right outside college. Of course, there's exceptions, like if you're being like a surgeon or something,
right.
if you're going to make more than a lineman. But a lot of these guys make really great money and they're have really fulfilling fucking jobs, and they just
And
are
it's
not as, yeah.
it's like that's another thing that like a lot of other professions can't necessarily say. It's like the more people you have, the more you need people to service the things that everybody takes for granted.
Totally.
The more, medical students you have in the field, generally the less opportunity there is for each individual because there's more demand without more supply, right? So it's like any like yeah you can like try to become like another lawyer, another brain surgeon or whatever, but there are already those people out there, and it's not like they're just dying off left and right. So it's in many situations kind of like with teachers where it's like, well, once somebody is a teacher and they've decided they're going to be a teacher, like unless they trip on the friggin' steps or get into a car crash on the way to work, like they're making it to 60, 70, whatever they need to do. And because they're teachers and they don't get the chance to really save up any money, they're probably going to be doing it even longer. You
Yeah,
know,
that sounds accurate.
so I guess my point with that is like with the trades is that unlike with the well paying, the good paying, whatever jobs that you get from college, or at least most of those, the trades will only have more work required, I feel like, in time.
I mean, until we get to the point of automation for certain things, like
Oh
we
yeah, then
have,
there's weird.
right? Yeah, but we're not. I wouldn't think we're anywhere close to that for most of the trades. Um, you know, I honestly think it boils down to societal perception of status, right?
Mm.
Like if you did for some reason, college is, and like having a college level job is like a higher status symbol, or it's looked upon in a different light than a trade. However, a trade usually requires, depending on what you go into, like years of an apprenticeship and study. Like you have this. I knew somebody who was doing a welding program, and like it was a 5-year apprenticeship, and each year they got paid a little bit more. So like the first year they got paid like dog shit, and then they also had to go to classes 2 nights a week, but they didn't pay for the classes. It was like included in their dog shit, you know, whatever salary. Each year they made more, and I think it was 5 years before they were like fully certified, could go work wherever they wanted. This was a program through the shipyard. I grew up right next to the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in New Hampshire.
Okay.
But it was great because there was tons of opportunities for kids coming out of high school, and I do think having the shipyard right next to where I grew up did help to expand understandings of what you could do for work if you didn't want to go to college. I also think that college, like, you know, this part 1 of this podcast was about fundamental structural issues within school systems, right? And how we educate and teach. I think that applies to secondary schools, post-secondary education as well, right? Like, if you think that there's issues in elementary, middle, and high school, and that doesn't happen when you get to college, I'm so sorry to inform you that you are incorrect. And, you know, on a personal note, as someone who went to college and graduate school for education and was learning the best ways that we can teach children based on the research, we weren't using those methods to learn our graduate information. Let that sink in.
That had to be truly mind-boggling.
It was.
Did anybody somebody must have mentioned it.
The girl here raised her hand, and when I can't help but notice that you're talking about, you know, the topic of the day when I said this was about essentially taxing working memory, and how once you've reached a threshold of what you're trying to learn, it's just, you reach what we call frustrational level, and your brain just goes, this is too fucking hard, and I don't want to do it. So if you've ever tried to learn another language, right, you have way more words that you don't know than words that you know, and so it becomes really overwhelming to try to like make a sentence if you only know like 2 words out of this 10-word sentence. And that's because scientifically humans have like a cutoff point where it just gets too hard. The number of things you know versus the number of things you don't know are skewed and off, and your brain goes, fuck this, I don't know what's happening. So we're learning this lesson, and she's like, so you have 60 pages of reading tonight, and I'm gonna need you to write, you know, whatever. I don't remember what the assignment was, but I remember being like, I feel like we're missing the point here in real life. So it is interesting though, right? In a program where I'm supposed to be going off into the world to model best practices, we're not even using them.
What did they say?
She giggled, actually, and she was like, well, we have to have you prepared. Like that was that's the scapegoat, right? Is like, I need to get through my checklist of things I need to have told you, so we need to do this. And then I'm thinking that's what it's going to look like when we're in a public school and we're talking about elementary school students instead of graduate school students. It's going to be the same thing. Well, my curriculum requirements are XYZ, and I don't want to get back into elementary ed, but my point being, we don't practice what we preach in college either. College education is structured in an extremely similar way. I would argue there's, because of the age group of people and like just being more independent, it's a little easier to find resources for support and help and to know when you're struggling. Whereas like a 9-year-old is not going to be able to be like, you know, that essay I got a D on, I should go to the support systems in my school to get a B on it. So there's like a little bit of a difference there, but I don't see a lot of difference between public education and 99% of like college level education.
Right. Well, I mean, there is a lot of crossover where you have like all the things you don't need to learn from primary school, and then you have electives.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's like in order to get this degree, you need to take this, physical elective or this, this thing or this. It's like, dude, I'm going to be a botanist. I don't need to know about math or about like world history or whatever it is. Like I never wanted to be a botanist. My point being is that you have to you are obligated for your program to take classes that have nothing to do with your course of study. It's like, oh, we want you to be this or that. It's like, look, I'm not here to develop a well-rounded education. I can do that for free by reading a goddamn book. You know,
You're not wrong there.
it doesn't cost $250.
Well, it isn't a waste of my time when that time could be so much better spent in direct observation in whatever field you want to be in. You don't even have to be reading a book or learning anything. If you spent the same amount of time that they make you take fucking liberal arts women's studies and you have no interest in that, and instead you took that 3 hours a week and went and shadowed for whatever occupation that you're interested in to see the real day-to-day life of somebody working there, even if you did not say anything to the person you're following and you only observed, I believe you would get so much more out of that than a class that has nothing to do with what you are learning or want to do in life and with which you're not interested. However, I will say that I enjoy the idea of a liberal arts education. First of all, because I'm a bitch-ass bleeding heart liberal most of the time. But second of all, because I do believe it allows us to understand different vantage and viewpoints of things that we might not have otherwise considered. And I think that's a helpful thing to have during, the time period where you're starting to think independently. So in college is like a great time to have sort of a class that challenges what you might initially think. However, should it be required? Does anyone actually get all that much out of it? I don't know. I don't think so.
No, I mean, you'd think that, most people, it's not like you hear a lot of people like bringing up like actual, like bringing up things in conversation that shows that they have a knowledge of something beyond what they do for a living.
Mhm.
And I mean, I think that if the liberal arts education element had as significant an impact on people as like it's supposed to, then it would have fostered like a more general interest in learning, which for most people goes about as far as their news feed. And I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing is that like most people they don't want to learn about all kinds of different things, and they don't like they're not curious people who are like fascinated with life. And that's the funny thing for me is like whenever I point out, it's like, yeah, this person is just being like trash. And someone's like, well, just because they don't, they don't like what you like or they don't share your opinion. It's like this isn't about sharing an opinion. It's about the fact that you can see in what these people are doing is they're just not pursuing things. They're taking the low road. Wherever gravity takes them, that's the direction they're going because it's what's easy. And the thing about education is that like honestly, most colleges are more so like factories than anything else.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
like when you have people who go in, the main job, I mean, if you think about it, it's like a funnel. It's a marketing funnel. Is that you like
Yeah.
they get you to value it a lot by making you apply for it. You have to kind of like there's all these different elements to like build up the value of going to college. And then you get in there and you're in dorms where people are you just hear people freaking screwing or partying or this or that or whatever the whole time. Yeah, great place to be studying and whatnot, right? And then you go to class and some of the professors are whatever, it's like you can tell that the only reason they're here is because nobody wants them anywhere else or something. Like it's not the case for everybody. My point
Right.
being is that like you pay a crap ton of money to go to even community college for what you're getting. Like, it is a lot of money. The ridiculous cost of the textbooks, that like in no other case would anybody be able to charge this much unless it was like, I don't know, like a vintage version of the Bible from like 1732, you know?
But you're hitting the nail on the head here because it's a business.
Right.
And it's a business that we've made essential for some professions, for a lot of professions.
Right.
And when I think about it and I try to boil it down, what it really comes down to is credentials and like, what does it take to be able to do the job you want to do? What if you pick a job out of a hat? If you're like, I want to be a lawyer. This is a good example, actually. I want to be a lawyer. Lawyer is actually like an exception to this rule, whereas if you pass the bar, you can practice law. This is my understanding. And you don't have to go to college to be able to pass the bar, but it's going to really fucking help you when it's structured, right? Or allegedly it's going to help you. But you could go and study and just take the bar. 90% of jobs that require college, that's not the case. It's not like, oh, it requires college because there's so much information to learn. No, it requires college because you decided as, a fucking government body that this is what it takes to be able to do this. And I think that's great in a lot of cases. Like, do I want my brain surgeon to be like, well, I looked in the library for a long time and I feel like I know what I'm doing? No, like,
There's a really good video tutorial on YouTube. Trust me.
yeah, no, I absolutely don't fucking want that. So, like, I think that it's good that certain guiding professional agencies, like when you see someone is board certified, that's like a standard that we look for, right? Like, and I feel safe because I know if you're board certified, it means you had to do these things. And now I feel at peace with like having you be the professional person to do whatever the job is. Okay. So I think there are a certain finite number of jobs that should fall under that category, where you need not only the education, but the hands-on training, because like with a brain surgeon, you're going to need to do a fellowship and what's it called?
The Two Towers.
Whatever.
Return
Like,
of the
yeah, there's, I forget all, like, I never went to doctor school, but there's like a set of things where it's like you do your med school, but then you do your, essentially internship, that's the wrong word. And then after that's done, you then do a fellowship, and there's all these steps. It's like 16 years before you're cracking open someone's head and fucking around in there. And that's good. This is great. Very thankful for that. However, what if you want to be a teacher? What if you want to teach kindergartners, right? And I actually have a lot of mixed feelings on this particular example, but I saw a news article that I think it's the state of Florida is allowing veterans and veterans' wives or spouses to become teachers in the state without any formal education. Like, I think you have to have a high school degree, but because they have a shortage of teachers and because it helps to support this population of people, it's now, so what you're saying to me is that prior education didn't matter because we're just going to wing it. And the truth is, a lot of being a teacher, yes, there's some things that you need to book learn, but I believe you could get 80% of it from being an apprentice. If you were like a teacher's assistant for X amount of years and got paid and then could graduate to teacher, right? I'm sorry, I've been talking for a really long time, but my point is
I'm just tired. No worries.
If I had a magic wand, I would make a lot more of the occupations that require just a fucking degree to do them, require an apprenticeship to do them, because it makes more fucking sense. And you also get paid during an apprenticeship, and you also learn in real time how what you're learning applies to what you're going to need to be doing. And it just makes 1,000,000% more sense to me.
Yeah, I think there's a big thing that governments you're not considering, which is that, and this is going to start sounding like it's not related, but I'll bring it back in, which is that,
Okay.
you know, business people are always finding or looking for ways, new niches and stuff and whatever, like a way to make more money, right? And a big part of that is something that involves like automation, like you kind of got at before, where it's like, those fancy vending machines that you'll see at like airports that like have like healthy vegan meals or something like that, that you can literally just buy out of that. It doesn't need a person to be working at it. Somehow they managed to make that work. Well, that's way more profitable if you think about it, because there's much
Yeah.
less overhead. All you need is literally all you need to pay for is the actual food itself. Whoever's going to put them in there, assuming it's not you, if you own the business, I guess, uh, the technician and electricity. And that's it. And that's the thing, is that it is far more efficient as a business in that capacity than a full operating restaurant or whatever, because
Oh yeah.
even just to produce the food in another location, if you were making the food and then packaging it, I have to believe is going to be much easier to set up than a restaurant where you have people that are, the coding has to be different. And me bringing it back, so when as businesses or business people, entrepreneurs, whatever, are executing on these things and coming up with new solutions to things that, the current solutions are just whatever, this is when you start getting the uh, the automated menu selection at McDonald's. This is when you get, the order, like the machines that are like doing this and that and doing more of this and that. This is when you start making super, super entry level jobs for people defunct. And
Yeah.
when you do that, first of all, you're going to have a ridiculous unemployment issue, because there are going to be like people who this is what they do for a living, while this, like, it's sad to say that that's what somebody does for a living in the first place. But the point being is that for most people, there's a time in your life when you need the retail job or the waitress
Yes.
job or the food service job or whatever to make some damn money, right? If your college education involves needing to pay with something that has nothing to do with your profession while you're spending 4, 6, 8 years learning it all, what happens when those jobs don't exist anymore?
That's a great question. Um, I did, while I was physically in school, I didn't work a second job, but in the summers, obviously, I did, and that was like waitress, pizza delivery girl.
Right?
I worked in an underwear factory at one point. Yeah, no, ran
Risque.
the, ran the gamut. I was folding the boxes to put the underwear in. But you need that. You need that in between, where it's just a way to make some money. And I do think that automation is going to change. We sort of touched on this in the last episode, right? That technology and automation are going to fundamentally change what the job landscape looks like. And I am not of the belief that it's like, oh, it's all doom and gloom. It's just going to be different.
Right.
There's still going to be plenty of opportunities. They're just not going to be the same. So, in a lot of ways, we have no real way of knowing right now what it's going to look like even 20 years from now, 30 years from now. So how do you plan for that?
Yeah, because I think that's the thing, is that like people are all for implementing this and getting that or whatever when it's beneficial to them, but then because most people don't want to focus on things they don't like because they're trash, they run into this situation. It's like, I didn't know that was going to happen. Yeah, because you weren't paying attention. And that is exactly what's going to happen with education. Honestly, it's what's happening now, because you, I don't have stats or whatever, partially because I find them boring as hell, but also
Okay.
because,
Statistics are so boring.
I mean, they're relevant, but it's just not something that I enjoy. I'd
That's
rather
fair.
pay somebody else to do it for me, and then I just look at the results. But I mean, with the number of people getting into like these, like in online marketing, for example, and like other
Yeah.
things, choosing to take different paths to, they're being more intentional with their futures in terms of that element of
Yeah,
like
and
how
they're
they make their living. College is very much not about that. It is
well, they're
about,
not wasting their time.
right, because they
They,
see that it doesn't, that this thing
yes,
doesn't work. And
yes.
so what you have is this gigantic apparatus that most people are convinced is what you need to do. And then you have a growing amount of people realizing that no, you don't. And if you spend $3,000 on a business, like an internet marketing thing, oh, it's a scam. Motherfucker, how much did you spend on tuition
Yeah.
this year? Without
Well,
board. How much
it's
you spend on
funny.
your books?
It's funny because I was talking to my mom about Copy Accelerator, which, if for those of you that don't know, Isaac and I are both members of a mastermind called Copy Accelerator, and I joined. We both joined actually at the same time last year.
Yep. How
When I joined,
convenient.
I know, right? We're like twinsies. But when I joined, everyone in my life thought it was this like very fucked up scheme to take my money. And
Like
I,
multi-level marketing or whatever.
right, I was 99% sure it wasn't. But also, I clearly value education a lot, and I understand that education costs money. So when I saw the price tag, it normally would have barked. No offense, Steph. But I
For
looked
most
at it.
people, yeah.
Well, yeah, it is a significant investment every month. But I looked at it the way I would look at a year in college. And for me, that was very helpful because, first of all, I, I saw all the different ways in which I was being supported, aside from like, here's a bunch of things for you to read, and maybe I'll grade them on you. That's not how it works. But it was much easier to visualize how I was going to invest the money in this thing and then reap the benefit of that investment basically immediately. When you're going into college, it's much harder like to see that unless you're going to be like, so I feel like certain career paths have very visual, like I'm going to go and then when I'm done my 4 years, I'm going to be this thing, like a nurse or something. And then my trajectory as a nurse is this. My undergrad degree is actually in communications and media studies. I minored in psychology and child development. But when you get a degree in communications and media studies, and they're like, there's no like set path afterwards. It's not like I'm going to get this degree and then BA, you have to like figure it out. What are you gonna do? You're gonna be a radio host? You're gonna be a news editor? Are you gonna be a fucking nanny? Because that's what I did. Um, but it's much less obvious. So it is just like for every person that goes to college for 4 years and spends the money to get a degree in like English or philosophy or basically something that they don't really know what they want to do, but they went for 4 years and can prove that they can show up to a meeting and do homework. Those are the people that I'm like, oh, someone give them a refund. It's not
Right.
helpful for your time and your money.
Right. The return on investment. It's like
Terrible.
you just think like if you bought these textbooks out of pocket and then you like just went and found somebody who like just is really passionate about the topic in like a Facebook group or something and paid them like $50 an hour, once a week or whatever, you get basically the same outcome. If you really think about it, like, and it's like the only thing you don't have at the end of it all is a quality satisfaction guarantee.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all a freaking college diploma is, if you really think about it. It is a satisfaction guarantee to hand to the customer, the business, to say, or your money back.
It I do think it's one of the bigger schemes we have going on right now in the United States. And that this is coming as someone who very much values education, but the way that we peddle it to the youth of America is fucked up. It's
Well,
very fucked up.
it comes back to the evolution of things, is that you can't, it's kind of like when you're like working out, where you can't spot reduce. It doesn't work like that, right?
Yeah.
You can't selectively innovate with technology and make all these like, uh, all these strides and whatnot, and have it not be shown with glaring, like, ridiculous, extracting, painful detail how just far behind so many other things are. And college is simply one of those things, is that we do not live in a time when the majority of human, like, people in most countries, and by most countries, yes, I'm talking about, not statistically speaking, like of all the countries in the world, I mean, you know, in Europe, in, England, in Australia, and, in Asia and whatever, like most people can read now.
Yeah.
There was a time when that literally was not guaranteed. It's like, oh, like, well, the reading levels, it's like, no, you don't understand. Reading level is level of proficiency in reading. There were people who could not read everywhere for so long. We have a situation now where people have so much access to information in their pocket. College is not from a time when that was a factor. And
Right.
so you have something that's basically an outdated institution. And it's like, okay, great. Like, but it does something, right? It's like, okay, I understand that is better than nothing. But better than nothing does not give excuse to not innovate where that's concerned.
Right.
And it goes back to what we talked about last week, where it's kind of weird how when government's in control of something, doesn't seem like there's usually that much innovation going on there.
No, there's not.
So
There's not. In fact, I do think that a lot of times when government's involved, because there's so much discussion and we have to make sure everybody's happy, or at least the majority's happy with this decision that we made, blah, 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 which I
great
get,
bureaucracy.
right? It just, it stalls everything. And we end up with a system that no one really actually likes, right? Like, nobody voted for this particular way of things to run. It was just the compromise we came up with for what everybody else wanted.
Kind
I was listening to what you were just saying about like things being outdated, and I was thinking about when I was in undergrad, I took a Irish literature course. Very cool. It's very fun. Let's say that that's what you wanted to study, and like you're like, I'm so into Irish literature, I want to study all the Irish literature. Yeah, you could go get a degree in Irish literature if you wanted to, but like that information, because it's not a hands-on skill that you're learning, it's like basically a history,
right.
or like, it's you're not being asked to perform it. You could, all of that can be done online. Even if you wanted to talk to the most biggest experts in Irish literature, could be done online now with Zoom. So like there is zero need for a physical institution to learn that. If that's what you're passionate about, that's what you want to do. That could all be done digitally, and you wouldn't have to, part of why college is so expensive is they're like, well, we have like buildings to maintain, and we have like professors to pay, and we have like we have to update the kitchens for the feeding of the student. It's all very like structural issues that cost a lot. So if you remove the structure, it should indefinitely lower the cost of accessing that education, right? You would think. But nobody wants to do that because they're making a lot of money the way things are. No one wants to stop making money.
And that's the funny thing is that even if they did that, their margins would just go down. So it's like, even where it comes to like, oh, well, we're making lots of money, maybe they would lose their excuse to overcharge for it, which is an entirely different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because now they can just bury it in us while we have to do the same thing as, the government putting up the toll booths when they were building the highways. Like, well, we need to pay for it somehow. And then said, oh, well, we need to finish it somehow. Well, we need to expand it somehow. It's like, well, we have to
Sounds like a
maintain
you
it
problem.
somehow. It's like, asshole, this was supposed to be here while you were building it, and then you just used it as a pretense to charge people more for no reason other than, because you can. And that is a big, that is where I think a lot of people fall, like when they're thinking about the nature of these things, like they'll think about, is it is it the institution that fails in a given case, or is it simply a conflict of interest? Because if people were not motivated by greed to make money off of education, then how inefficient would it be? Or if you had people motivated by greed who were actually, looking for a better solution, like in either case, you would have innovation. Because if you were just talking about, okay, what do teachers and students actually need to produce the best learning outcome process, et cetera, then there would be innovation. If you had people who could just come in with, different like freaking education funnels, you bet your ass they could come up with a better one than, normal colleges, because
Yeah,
that's what business people do. So in either case, whether you're giving control back to, like, well, not back to, because if they ever have it, but to the teachers and such, or if you're just giving it to business people, I feel like in both those cases, it would still be a better model,
yeah,
because what you have now is just something that's like trying to maintain itself and,
totally. And struggling.
yeah,
Yeah,
and failing.
yeah. Well, and we're seeing that there's less people going to college out of high school
as, as well there should be.
as well. Well, because we're figuring it out. You know, I don't feel like I was ever given a lot of a choice, because if I think back to being like 18, 17, 18 when you're making that decision, my choices were go to college and figure it out while I was there what I wanted to do with
Right?
I didn't know, or like get a job working. Yeah, the company Stonewall Kitchen is
Okay.
based in the town I grew up in, so you could get a job there, or you could get a job like basically being a receptionist at some local business, and like that's kind of what I thought my options were. So like given those two options, I was like, I'm going to college. But I also had no idea what I wanted to do when I got there. I changed my major like 4 or 5 times. I was a business major, then I was a child development major, then I was a history major, then I went back to being a child development major, and then I changed to communications and media studies. To 5 times that I was like paying an ass load of money and had no idea where I was going with it, which should be fucking illegal. It should, but I think we're getting better at Gen Z's awesome. Okay, love the Zoomers. They're great because they question everything, and they're like, "Why the fuck would you? Why do I need to go to college?" Great question. Why do you need to go to college? Why does he? Why does that person need to have a gender? I don't know either. But like, I just love that they're so spicy and that they question everything. But Gen Z is they're seeing through this. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're like, this is bullshit. I don't fucking do this. I'm gonna go start a TikTok channel where I do fucking that paint stuff where you pour it, and I'm gonna get 1 million subscribers. And I'm gonna sell them on Etsy, and that's what I'm gonna do. I don't need a business degree. I don't need to go to college for that. That's my fucking plan. Awesome. I wish I thought that was a route when
Well,
I was
nobody
your age.
thought any of that crap was around, I maybe it said, yeah, even like a decade ago, like it was like being a YouTuber was like there were people who were making a living with it, but it wasn't common enough that people actually, like, if you tell somebody now that you want to like start a YouTube channel or whatever, it's like, hey, like, good luck.
Yeah.
You try telling them that, like, even like
Yeah.
7 or 8 years ago, they'd be like,
No.
motherfucker. Like, so it's to a certain extent, like the reason why they are aware of those options is because they already had that example to follow from. But the point remains what you said, where it's like pointing out, it's like, yeah, this doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, whatever. Um, that doesn't mean that I think that somebody should be able to, say, I feel like I'm a cat and I just need to follow along
Sure,
with it. But
sure.
with extremes come extremes. And relative to education, it is definitely beneficial because it's like even just the notion of, okay, why, if it's like an internet marketing thing, is it a scam? But if it's normal traditional college, oh, like it's suddenly okay to be paying like 250, 300, probably more now for a textbook.
Yeah.
That's not a scam. You really
It
think it
is.
costs
It
them,
is
like
absolutely a scam.
you think it costs that? Yeah.
It's a fucking scam, guys.
The people who were paid to write it, the cost to produce it, and the person who like mans the register or stocks it or whatever, I hate to say, but I'm pretty sure that they're not getting paid royalties on any of this. I'm
Yep.
pretty sure they weren't paid so highly at the time that $250 books is the only way that you can manage to maintain a bit. It's just a high margin business because they know you need it, right? People don't charge as much for phones because we need phones. It's because people feel like they need the phones.
Yeah, right, right. You need the 12th edition of this book, and your professors will say that must be 12th edition or higher, right? Um, so you'll go on, and first of all, that already implies there's been 11 versions that are now redundant circulating in the world that at one point cost $150, and now they're worth nothing. And now the information is considered outdated and not even useful. So what the fuck does that? That's mind blowing, right? But
Right.
now also the differences in editions from one to the other are usually like so minute. It's like one study, a handful of studies to which you could have just gone on Google Scholar and found the fucking studies. So the textbook thing is in Europe, that is a racket. That is absolutely a scam. Yeah, and we should be able to do them digitally now. You should also be able to get them audiobook. That should be an accessibility thing for everyone.
Mm.
But it's not. And yeah, the textbook thing's a total scam.
So I think that's a big element of when it comes to like questioning things, and in this case, it being education, where it's like, okay, like even like think about it this way: if you, it's not true for all info products, but generally speaking, if you buy the info product uh, and then you're not satisfied, you can often get a discount, or not a discount, a refund. Like that's a big thing that they teach in business. Like do a refund because you're going to make more money having the guarantee there than you'll
Yeah.
lose by people taking advantage of you. That's the funny thing is like as a consumer, like you always kind of think is like, like is this guarantee like real though? Like will they actually do that? And it'd be interesting to just go out there and see how much of this stuff like they will honor the guarantee. My point being is that if you buy like an info product thing, like I don't know, like facial stretches to counteract aging or whatever,
Okay.
the appearance of aging. If you do that and you regularly do the exercise or whatever, and et cetera, chances are that like a decent number of those, if you say it's like, yeah, like this isn't working, I've been doing it for 6 months, they'll accept the refund. I, whatever as long as it's within the terms of the refund. If you go to college and you get your master's degree and you go out and you spend 3 years trying to get a job with that degree and you don't get crap, can you go back to the college and be like, hey, this didn't do what it was supposed to do?
Absolutely.
I'll be taking my, $150,000 back, please, or give the other thing to the government. Just give me back the money that I gave you.
It's the
No.
only time you can ever get a refund is if you went to like, I don't remember what they are called, maybe DeVry University, but like basically like Trump University, like actual like scam institutions, and you were genuinely scammed out of your money. And I say genuinely, like by the government's definition, not by like most normal people's definition.
Right.
That's like the only time. And that refund that you get is just in student loan forgiveness So if you've already paid it, well, that's on you. So we wouldn't, to your point, we wouldn't allow this type of level of dissatisfaction and problem solving, therefore, of that in any other industry.
Right. Because you'd be called out on it, as everybody loves to do. But in college, you can't do that because that's not what you do, right? But it's
Right.
like, you don't do that because that's not what you do is the stupidest reason for anything ever.
Yeah.
Followed shortly thereafter, but well, nobody else told me it was an issue. It's like that's other people who don't know what they're doing, not telling you that something is an issue is not like a point of fact of as to why like you didn't do anything wrong. My point being is that it seems like, and this is reflected in like the politics stuff as well, where it's like you have these different extremes where it's, it's either like, you should be able to have like an abortion at any point, no matter, like, even if it's the day before you would deliver, or you shouldn't be able to do it at all. Like, it's like you have these ridiculous extremes that are both wrong. And in this case, like, for example, like the Gen Z, like everything, like question everything, older generations, it's like, you're whatever tradition. There have always been elements of this, but I feel like it's gotten more and more intense as time has gone on. And it's definitely the case when it comes to education. The only thing is that the only thing propping up college is the social, um, I'm sure that there's an actual sociological term for it, like more or more or whatever, but like the the social convention of going to college. But there's nothing competitive about it, if you think about it.
I mean, I think there's status in being able to say you got into certain colleges, right? Um,
Yeah, I just mean
oh,
college as the notion of college, not a given like
true.
specific college.
Yeah, yeah. Pretty much most people can get out of high school can get into college, and if you can't get into college out of high school, most people, if it was their goal, could get into either community college or a regular college, you know, after high school, given
Mm.
certain circumstances. Yeah.
And this is something that I think you'll enjoy being able to point out, being a self-described, often bleeding heart liberal, but it is interesting how ultimately when you go to like Harvard, or wherever else, any Ivy League school or um, Oxford, whatever, yeah, I'm sure that there are elements of the education that you benefit from, like, they can, because they can pay professors more, maybe they can get like leading experts or whatever. But also you're going for, like you said, the kind of the social pedigree of being able to say that, oh, like, oh, they went to Oxford,
Yeah.
like, or the networking that happens as a result of it as well, which of course these institutions are even more expensive. And so it does create a sort of paywall that makes it very difficult for someone who doesn't come from a well-off family in order to be able to take advantage of that. And so it's another flaw of the hierarchy that is established in education, whereas that there is kind of a built-in sort of discrimination against anybody who's not rich in that regard. You know,
So you make a good point. A lot of those really fucking hoity-toity ass institutions, like Ivy League schools, have like a certain number of low income students that they will take on. Like they actually have quotas to meet. But those students also need to be like, when they look at them, they're fucking actual geniuses, which is great because I'm glad we're rewarding certain skill areas. But also, like, it does, it's not, there's a purpose for it being exclusive.
mhm,
um that in itself sort of maintains this idea that they're like so much, they're like years ahead of other universities, they're like the top tier. But
right.
to the point, you know, you got enough money, you know enough people, you can probably get in. And your ability levels and skills next to that poor kid that had to like fight tooth and nail to get in are probably fairly different. So that the idea of like being able to buy your way into like a university like this to get that prestige, because it would be an embarrassment to the family if you didn't go to Yale, you know, like that kind of shit. It does just it does just make it turn into a big joke, right? And when you can look past that and see that, like, okay, a lot of these institutions of higher education are also research facilities, and they're doing a lot to like, you know, understand disease better and to promote growth as a society. That's like cool and great and stuff. But I also look at that as very separate from the idea of traditional education of what the college, like what the institution is built upon and therefore.
Right.
And I almost wish that they were separate entities. Well, first of all, I think if we're going to separate them, we just need to give all post-secondary education massive like overhaul. But
Right.
also back to credentialing and like identifying when do you actually need college to get a certain credential and when do you not? And let's
Yeah.
get fucking more realistic.
Right. And even in that the regard, like, does there need to be medical school, or could it be something that's an offshoot of the hospital? You know what I mean?
Well,
Why does there need to be an independent? Because, like, okay, there are things like, the bar, like becoming a surgeon of whatever kind, or, related medical field, whatever, like things that you literally do need to have whatever experience in this very particular thing to justify, starting being a professional in it. But all of those things already have institutions of some sort anyway. So why does there need to be some middleman between it all? Like, okay, like if you had the hospital running the program, then you can literally have all the tuition go into the hospital.
yes.
And now you don't need to donate money to the hospital because they're getting freaking college level infusion of cash, because you know that they're not getting paid that well, so it's like there are ways to do this better. And now you don't need this arbitrary system that just educates people, because they're literally being educated how to do what they need to do, where they need to be doing it,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I also think that we like in that setting too, like if you're an EMT or you're starting in a medical profession that doesn't require a certain amount of education, I'm not actually sure what the requirements for EMT are, but I'm pretty sure you don't need a college education for that.
Right.
And you're learning all of this stuff and you're like, man, I really want to be a nurse. You shouldn't have to go to school for 4 years to be a nurse. You
You
should
should be
be
able to
able,
segue it. Yeah.
yeah, that like the skill and knowledge you already have should count for something. And it should be practical and understood. Like these are the things you know as an EMT. This is what we know all of EMTs know. And this is the stuff that's missing that all the nurses know. But we don't take the time to do that, right? And that's where we end up being like, oh, well, you got to go for 4 whole years. And that seems ridiculous to be like, but I've been doing this job for 5 years. Why do I need? And so like creating more natural opportunities to move up in certain spaces. In the medical world, like we're using like a big juicy example because like people don't want to die from like their surgeon not going to college. But point being, there's lots of examples of different career paths that could have this like trajectory that don't because of a college degree. And that's bullshit.
Oh, because again, it comes back to like, well, why would you arbitrarily like make people go through a program or a course or whatever that they already have all the operating knowledge of?
Yeah.
And of course, there's going to be an excuse, but the real reason is because they have to pay for that class.
And I need them to pay for 4 years.
Right. If they can go to, anatomy for, the healing sciences, whatever the actual name would be, if they can go straight to 301 rather than 101, then that's 2 semesters worth of
Less money.
paying. Exactly. So, and that is ultimately where, like for me, like you can't even blame it on greed because it's just bad greed because it's not even, you can, again, you could make a better educational funnel and upsell the right people on the right on given things and whatever. You can give them that value. And the funny thing about being in business and being in marketing is that you realize that what a lot of what is blamed on greed is just complacency. It's just
Yeah,
laziness.
absolutely.
It's not,
Absolutely.
it's not even
Preach.
greed. It's like,
Yeah.
don't insult greed by saying that it's
Yeah.
based on greed because there are other people
Maybe
who
it
are,
started there, but
there are people who are being greedy who are making more money because they're providing a better solution.
yeah.
So I think the big like overarching message here is that like the, the institution is not prevailing. It's continuing to exist solely because it's what people have been doing. It
Yes.
doesn't have a competitive advantage against like independent educational, options. It's not cost efficient. It's not, there is no inherent form of value to it. It's like, oh, like, networking. It's like you can network anywhere. You would network with anybody else if you were doing the hospital, internship thing. So like that's not valid, like as opposed to like at home, learning or whatever. Like there's just nothing about college that I'm aware of that justifies it continuing to be an institution as it is, aside from simply not having enough, like not already having an alternative set up to handle the numbers that college currently processes. But that's literally just a question of scale,
Yeah.
you know? And I'm sure that there'd be plenty of business people who would be happy to, solve that problem.
Well, and this is why a lot of the Republican party wants to see education go private, which I have mixed thoughts about, but that is like supposedly something that I wouldn't know.
All right. I mean, the colleges that are there are not a viable solution, I guess, is something
Yes.
that hopefully everybody can agree on. And it's like at some point the the response to that has to stop being, well, this is the world that we live in, it's not perfect, but it's
It's
like,
what we
okay,
have.
great. But you know what? Just because things will never be as perfect as as we could necessarily come up in our heads, doesn't mean we can't in the real world make things a lot better.
Preach.
So yeah, I think that's everything I guess I kind of have to say on it. I don't know if there's any closing thought that you had for it.
Just don't buy into things just because. Like, don't go to college if you don't know what you want to do. Don't. Don't go to college if you don't know what you want to do. That's my final statement.
Yeah,
Because I
that's an
do have to
expensive
run.
learning process.
Yeah, yeah. It's a waste of your time. Go travel, spend that money, go to like backpack around Europe and think about it for a while.
Or try to
You'll
start a business,
or try to
like,
start a business or just do something to figure out what you like and what you don't like, and it doesn't have to be for 50 grand a year while you do that. But I do have to run. This has been
nah, I
so
got
so
you.
wonderful.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah,
And as
anytime.
always, I forgot.